The United States, despite being a global economic powerhouse, relies heavily on imports in many key areas, essential for its continued prosperity. From raw materials and energy to food, beverages, and skilled labor, the US economy is deeply integrated into international trade. This has been the case for decades, with global commerce acting as a cornerstone of the country's economic stability. However, the dynamics of US imports were increasingly questioned under the leadership of President Donald Trump and his America First policy. The Trump administration took a strong stance on reducing reliance on foreign goods, introducing tariffs and trade restrictions, targeting not only rivals but also allies such as Canada, the European Union, and China. The goal was to shift the trade balance in favor of domestic production, appealing to nationalist sentiments and aiming to safeguard American industries. While these policies garnered support from advocates of stronger domestic manufacturing, they overlooked the complex interconnected nature of global trade that underpins the US economy. In reality, the US depends on foreign imports for much more than consumer goods. Essential resources such as crude oil, rare earth metals, and natural gas are imported to meet energy demands and support key sectors like technology and defense. Additionally, foreign talent, skilled labor, and innovative minds are crucial to maintaining the nation's competitive edge in the global economy. One consequence of Trump's tariffs is that Canada, a significant trade partner, is now considering its own retaliatory measures. These could extend far beyond simple counter-tariffs. Given Canada's vital role in supplying energy and natural resources, its response could deeply impact the US. For example, Canada could restrict exports of oil and electricity, disrupting the American energy supply chain. Canada is the largest energy exporter to the US. In 2024, the US imported $19.5 billion worth of energy from Canada, including oil, natural gas, electricity, and uranium. In response to a proposed 25% tariff on Canadian goods, Canada is exploring a range of counteractions. Ontario, for instance, is considering halting electricity exports to the US, particularly to states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota, which rely heavily on Canadian power. Approximately 21% of New York's electricity during peak periods comes from Ontario. Cutting off this supply could affect millions of American homes and raise energy prices, especially during high-demand seasons like winter and summer. Ontario is also considering measures such as banning US-made alcohol from its markets and imposing stricter controls on key mineral products. American bourbon whiskey and craft beer, popular in Canadian markets, could be targeted. In 2022, American whiskey exports to Canada totaled over $154 million, with Ontario being the largest buyer. Restricting these exports would harm US distilleries and breweries reliant on Canadian demand. On a broader scale, Canada is contemplating tariffs on various US goods, similar to actions taken in 2018 when Canada retaliated with $6.6 billion CAD, $12.6 billion USD in tariffs. The current list of targeted goods may include steel, aluminum, agricultural products like pork, apples, and dairy, as well as essential raw materials. Canada, the second largest supplier of critical minerals like cobalt, nickel, and lithium to the US, contributes about 25% of these imports. These materials are crucial for technologies like batteries and electric vehicles. Limiting or taxing these exports could disrupt US industries, heavily reliant on Canadian resources. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has proposed a drastic measure. restricting electricity exports to the US. In 2023, Ontario exported nearly 7,000 gigawatt-hours of electricity to the US, with New York alone importing 21% of its electricity from Ontario. This highlights Canada's critical role in maintaining reliable energy supplies for many US regions. Disruptions in this supply could lead to instability and increased costs for millions of American consumers. Canada is also considering excluding US companies from bidding on Canadian government contracts. This move would affect industries like construction, technology, and defense, where American firms have a significant presence. With over $200 billion CAD in annual government procurement spending, such a decision would shift contracts to domestic or other international suppliers, impacting US businesses while boosting Canadian industries. This would align with Canada's Buy Canadian strategy in response to US concerns about illegal immigration and drug trafficking. Canada is considering increasing its border security investments. Over $1 billion CAD could be allocated to enhancing surveillance, staffing, and the creation of a joint task force with US agencies. This strategy would aim to address US security concerns. Concerns regarding Canada's commitment to bilateral cooperation on shared issues were highlighted. Focusing on energy imports, the US continues to depend heavily on foreign supplies, despite increasing domestic energy production. Crude oil imports, especially from Canada, are essential for meeting the country's energy needs. In 2024, the US imported approximately 6.1 million barrels of crude oil daily, with Canada providing about 67% of that amount. Major pipelines like the Keystone XL and Enbridge Mainline emphasize Canada's significance in the US energy supply. Beyond crude oil, the US also imports substantial amounts of refined petroleum products, including gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. These imports are particularly crucial for regions like the East Coast, where refining capacity is limited. Additionally, the US imports natural gas from Canada, essential for heating and power generation in the Northeast, especially during winter. In 2024, Canada exported 7.4 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day, ensuring reliable energy availability and price stability in the US, while the America First policy aims to reduce reliance on foreign trade. The interdependence between the US and Canada is undeniable. Trade restrictions or tariffs could have significant consequences, particularly in sectors like energy, technology, and defense. To address rising energy demands and occasional domestic supply shortages, the US imported approximately 38.92 terawatt-hours of electricity in 2024, with over 95% coming from Canada, primarily through hydroelectric power. This clean and reliable energy source played a critical role, especially during extreme weather events, preventing blackouts and ensuring grid stability. States like New York and Michigan were heavily reliant on Canadian electricity, with New York importing about 21% of its energy from Ontario. Coal imports accounted for less than 1% of US energy imports in 2024, with around 4 million short tons arriving from Colombia, Indonesia, and Australia, mainly for industrial use. Uranium imports were vital for the US's 93 nuclear reactors, which generated about 20% of the nation's electricity. In 2024, the US imported around 50 million pounds of uranium, primarily from Canada, Kazakhstan, and Australia. However, following a ban on Russian uranium imports, which previously supplied 27% of enriched uranium for US reactors, the country is seeking alternative suppliers and focusing on domestic uranium enrichment. Regarding oil, Canada is considering its response to potential US tariffs on Canadian oil. One option includes reducing or halting exports to the US, which could have widespread consequences. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has suggested using energy as leverage, including suspending electricity exports to the US, which could impact 1.5 million American consumers in states like Michigan and Wisconsin. However, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith opposes cutting oil exports, warning that it would harm Canada's economy. Given Alberta's role as the largest crude oil producer for the US, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has advocated for a cautious approach, proposing alternative measures, such as tariffs on US goods like steel and aluminum, to protect Canada's economy while avoiding escalating tensions. In light of these challenges, Premier Ford announced a snap election for February 27, framing it as an opportunity to secure a mandate to address US tariffs. Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre, a strong contender to succeed Trudeau, has promised to retaliate against the US if tariffs are imposed. Poilievre emphasized the mutual harm such tariffs could cause and suggested seeking new trade partners to reduce Canada's reliance on the US. A grassroots movement emerged in Canada, sparked by an Ottawa entrepreneur who created Canada Is Not for Sale's hats in response to former President Trump's tariff threats. These hats gained attention after Premier Ford wore one during a meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau, fueling a national conversation on Canada's economic sovereignty. The proposed tariffs also strengthened the Canadian dollar, with the loonie rising by 0.2% against the US dollar.